Hello friends, in Unit 4 in Technical Report Writing, up till now we have talked about the different types of reports and the different contents in a particular report, and we have talked about the introductory section in the last session that we have had in the last interaction that we have had online. We talked about these contents, these subsections within the introductory section. Now today we'll be taking up the main body of the report as well as the concluding section, right? So this would be the agenda for the day. So let us begin our discussion on the main body. Now please understand, this is basically the crux of your report. This is actually the work that you are doing. Introductory section is only about introducing to the reader as to what you have done in the report. Again, concluding section is only concluding the report and putting up those things which you have not covered in the report. But main body is basically the crux of your report, the most important aspect of your report, and you have to deal with this main body in a very, very serious fashion. Now please understand that main body may stretch to 200-300 pages also, and it could be 30-40 pages also, depending on the overall size of your report. But generally speaking, it would be somewhere around 75 to 80% of your report. So for example, if you've got 100 pages, somewhere around 70 to 80 pages would be there in the main body. What all contents would be covered in the main body? Have a look. The introduction. Now you would recall that I've been telling you that when I am discussing the technical reports with you, I am discussing these technical reports with the view that you have to prepare your research reports, you have to prepare your project reports after doing your internship in the 4th semester, and then you have to also prepare your dissertation project report. So whatever discussion I'll be doing, I'll be basically referring mostly to these kind of research project reports or dissertation project reports that you have to write, right? So basically, what will be the various sections within the main body? The introduction, of course. Now in introduction, what you'll have to talk about? You'll have to talk about the research area. For example, you have gone to Patanjali and you have done a project on which particular brand is the strongest rival of Patanjali in Uttarakhand. So basically the research area is sales and marketing. Had you done your project on assessing the satisfaction level of employees working with Patanjali, then it would have been human resource management. Had you done your project on how well does the company Patanjali use its working capital, how efficiently does it use its working capital, then it would have been a report from which particular area function? It would have been a report from the finance function or finance area. So this is what we mean by research area, right? Then you also have to write in brief about the organization in which you have done your project or the organization that you are studying. So for example, if in your dissertation project you have studied an organization called Fruitage, which is operating in the Kumaon Hills, then you'll have to write a little bit about that particular organization also. Fine. Or for example, if you have researched SBI Life, which is basically a firm dealing with life insurance products, then you have to write about SBI Life also. So this is what you will be writing in the introductory section. Please ensure that you have to keep the introductory section very, very brief and only include relevant information. Now what do we mean by relevant information? Say you are doing your project with Uttarakhand Gramin Bank. You must have seen Uttarakhand Gramin Bank branches here in Pithoragarh also. Supposing you are doing it with Uttarakhand Gramin Bank UGB, right? So when you are writing about this particular organization, because you'll have to write about this organization in the introductory part, don't get into too many details, right? Only give a brief history of the organization, only give a brief snapshot of how many branches are there, of who the CEO is. You don't need to write about the number of employees and the number of customers and all the details. You only have to mention the most important details, right? Then let's talk about literature review. Now again, you will be today coming across some terms which you are still not familiar with, but you would get familiar with them in the due course as you move from your first year to second and third year. Now what do we mean by literature review? Basically, whenever you are doing some research which would be done by you as part of your dissertation project, or which would be done by you as part of your internship project, you do some research, you try to find out some new thing. Fine. For example, you want to find out whether business communication model is applicable in Degree College Pithoragarh also, and you are doing this research in Degree College Pithoragarh. You want to find out the business communication model that you have studied, whether it is also applicable in college, in our college, in educational institutions, these kind of settings. Then what will you do? You will have to first of all understand what business communication model is, who all contributed to development of this model. So all this would be part of literature. What do we mean by literature? Literature means all the knowledge about a particular topic which already exists. So this knowledge you can find this knowledge on the internet. Whatever is already known about business communication model, for example, whatever is known about sender characteristics or receiver characteristics, or maybe noise and the barriers, that would be basically the literature. Because you are doing your project on business communication, whether it is applicable, the model is applicable in degree college or not. So for your purpose, the literature would be everything connected to business communication. So you have to actually go through such literature, whatever is already known about business communication, and whatever you can learn from such knowledge, that you'll have to mention in the literature review. And why are you doing this? Because you are not going to do the same thing again. If something is already known, you know already in business communication that the sender is the one who sends message and the feedback is received by the sender, you are not going to discover it again. You don't have to do the same thing again. You will try to just do something different, something which has not already been done. For that you need to know what has already been done, which you can find out through literature review. So this is why you do a literature review. I'll give you another example. For example, you have studied about motivation. Now you want to find out which motivational tool to use at Degree College Pithoragarh or maybe SBI Life Pithoragarh branch. So you are doing this project in SBI Life Pithoragarh. So the name of the organization SBI Life Pithoragarh. So you'll have to mention about it in the introductory session. But then what do you write in the literature review? You write about the different motivation theories that you have studied. So in business organization management in the first semester, you are studying about various motivation theories. You might have read about the Maslow's theory or the Hertzberg's theory. So you have to write about this, because this is the pre-existing knowledge which is already there in this particular field. So about motivation, what is it that you already know? What is it that the world already knows? That you have to mention in literature review. And then you are going to do something over and above that. You are going to build upon that existing knowledge, and you are trying to find out something of your own. You are trying to find out some new findings. You are trying to discover something new about motivation through your project. So that is why you have to mention these learnings, the pre-existing knowledge, in the literature review. Then let's talk about the research methodology. And I would again only be touching upon research methodology in brief. Now what do we mean by research methodology? How do you conduct your research? How do you actually find out, taking the same example, how do you actually find out whether a particular motivation tool is going to be effective in SBI Life or not? For that you'll have to conduct a research. So how do you conduct this research? Every single thing that you have done will have to be mentioned here in the research methodology section within the main body. Here you will talk about what the research objectives were. So one of your objective was to find out what would be the best motivational tool for employees at SBI Life, Pithoragarh. Then which research design are you going to use? You will understand that there are different types of research design. So you'll have to mention which particular design you have used to find this out. How have you collected the data? So you must be collecting some data to understand which motivational tool is effective for SBI Life employees. So for that you might have conducted some interview, maybe, for example. So you conduct interviews and find out from the employees which particular motivational tool do they prefer. Do they prefer cash awards, or do they prefer paid leaves, or do they prefer some kind of a trophy? Which one is it that they prefer? For that, what you will do, you will interview them. So this is going to be a data collection method. So you'll have to mention how you have collected your data, right? Then you have to mention sampling procedure. So now I'm not going to discuss this because this is something that has to do with research methodology, which you would be studying in the 4th semester. But for now, you just need to understand that sampling procedure also has to be mentioned in this particular section. And then, what was your plan of analysis? How did you analyze the data that you have collected through interviews? So all these things have to be mentioned in the research methodology section. And then you have to present the data that you have collected during your project in form of bar diagrams, pie charts and scatter plots. And then you have to analyze this data also. What does this data mean? For example, you have been studying in statistics nowadays. You have discussed mean, median, mode. These are measures of central tendency. You have talked about standard deviation, correlation. So you may use one or more of these statistical tools to analyze the data, to make a sense of the data that you have collected. So in our case, SBI Life, you wanted to find out which motivational tool is going to be more efficient, more effective in SBI Life. And you said that there are two motivational tools which you are going to investigate. One is the cash awards and the other one is trophy. So which one is going to be more efficient in motivating the employees at SBI Life? So you have collected data using interviews. Then you have analyzed the data. So now whatever the data you have collected, you can present it through bar diagrams or pie charts or scatter plots. And whatever the data that you have collected, you have to make a sense of it. You have to analyze it. For that you have to use these statistical tools. So for example, if there are people who say that they prefer cash awards, then what is the mean preference score given by these people, by these employees whom you have interviewed? So this is what you have to basically do in the data analysis portion. And then once you have done the analysis, then you have to talk about whatever you have found out and whatever has been your recommendation. So based on this analysis, you will find out, you will get some results. So that also you have to mention, and you also have to mention the recommendations that you want to make, whatever suggestions you want to make to the government or to a particular company for whom you are working or for whom you are doing the internship, or to the college. So whatever recommendations you are making based on your analysis. So that also you have to present in the main body. Once you are through with this main body, then what will we do? We'll move over to the concluding section, which will have references. Now in this concluding section, we have to talk about references. Now what do we mean by references? Materials that you have used in the research. So that is what basically is reference. So have a look at this. What kind of material are we talking about? We are talking about research papers, we are talking about books, we are talking about newspapers and websites, etc. Now please understand, I told you a little while ago that to be able to do a project in motivation, you need to know whatever is the existing knowledge with respect to motivation. So you need to know about the various models which are already there. So how do you gather this information? You naturally would be referring to a research paper, somebody else research project, some book, some newspaper, maybe some website, or there can be other sources also. So whenever you are using these sources, you have to mention that you have actually borrowed some piece of information from a particular source. So you have to mention it. If you don't, it would be considered that you want to show that this information that you have collected is your own work. So for example, when you are doing your project in motivation and you are writing that Maslow has given a particular theory of motivation and there are self-actualization needs also. So now what do we mean by self-actualization needs? You have already read about this in business organization management. There are esteem needs or there are social needs. So when you talk about social needs, and if you don't quote Maslow and if you don't quote the research paper or the book from where you have collected this information that Maslow has given this particular theory, then it would be thought that you are trying to show that this theory has actually been given by you and not by Maslow. And this then would be considered plagiarism. Plagiarism is what? Plagiarism is basically using content created by somebody else and showing it as your own content. So maybe, for example, I'll give you a simple example. If somebody else has written a poem, you copy that poem and don't tell the audience that this poem has actually been written by somebody else. The audience would think that you yourself have written this poem, which actually would be a wrong thing to think, and this would be called plagiarism. Plagiarism is basically theft of somebody else's work. So maybe somebody else has written a project report, you are quoting something from that project report. Now if you don't mention the source from where you have quoted these items, these lines or these sentences, then it would be thought that you are trying to show that this particular content has been created by you, and this is absolutely illegal, and this is known as plagiarism. Is this fine? Just to make you understand better, let's say in my project report I want to quote the figures from the government findings that there are 130 crore people in India. The population is 130 crore. So when I write this in my report, please understand, I have not found it out. It is the government which has conducted a census and they have been able to find out that 130 crore is the population of the country. But if I mention it in my report that the population of India as of now is 130 crore and I don't quote the source and I don't mention anywhere that I have taken this up from the government website or from a government publication or from some report released by government, then what will the reader think? The reader would think that I myself have counted the number of people and I myself have come to this particular conclusion that there are 130 crore people in India. So this would be a wrong perception, and this was created because I did not quote the source. So I should have quoted the source. I should have said that this particular information has been taken from this particular news report released by the government. You understand? So this is how you have to quote the sources wherever you are taking something from. Now this is how you actually write the references. This is just one way. There are different formats. Now please understand, I'll give you an idea of what do we understand by these references. Now whosoever has prepared a particular report, he has mentioned these references. What does this mean? This means that this person who has prepared the report, he has actually read this research paper by C. Grunroos, and the title of this research project was this, and the research journal in which it got published was this, and this was the year of publication. So I know that whatever this person is saying is basically not his own creation, but he has actually borrowed it from this particular research paper written by C. Grunroos. Or whatever this person has been saying is not basically his own content, his own self-generated content, but he has actually borrowed it from the Times of India's Delhi edition on a particular day, that is 16 January 2007. Right? So this is how you have to mention the references. So for example, if you use the motivational theory, Abraham Maslow's motivational theory, so you have to mention Maslow, Abraham, then which particular book you read it from, and then when did that book actually get published, so that you have to mention here. Fine. Again, now you also have to mention bibliography has to be also there in your research report. in the concluding section. Now what is it? Background readings and other materials which have helped the researcher. Now how is it different from the reference? In reference you only mention those sources from which you have actually borrowed something while writing your research report, while writing your project report. But if you have benefited from some source but you have not actually directly quoted it, directly written it in your project report, then you have to mention all such sources in bibliography. So background readings and other materials which help the researcher, but they are not used directly in the research. Is that fine? So for example, if I have borrowed something from Abraham Maslow's theory of motivation, then I'll mention it in the reference section. But then the fact that motivation is very, very important in an organization and for the overall productivity of the organization. Now this is something which I have not actually directly read from a particular source. I've actually gone through so many books, and from there I've been able to understand this. So I don't need to mention this in reference section. I'll have to mention this in the bibliography section. So whatever readings have helped me, but I have not used them directly, not quoted them directly in my research report, all that stuff has to be part of the bibliography, right? Then we move on to the annexures. Now this is another subsection in the concluding part of the report. Now what do we mean by annexures? Annexures, basically they are placed at the end, and this is a material which, if it is put in the middle of the report, obstructs its flow. Now have you gone through your statistics books? You would find that towards the end of the book you would find some tables there. These tables are used while you are going through different chapters. For example, there could be a random number table there could be a Z table there, fine, there could be a log table there, right? So these tables have been put there because when the student is going through that book, he would be requiring these tables. But if you put this table in the middle of the book, that will obstruct the flow of that particular book, and that is why you are putting all these tables at the end. So this is what annexures do. Annexures are meant only for those reports or those items which, if you keep in the middle, then they will obstruct the flow of the report. So they are kept at the end. For example, if you have taken something from the government's 2011 census and you want to ensure that this particular table or figure that you have collected, that you have taken from the government's 2011 census, you want to put it in your report, you will have to put it at the end as annexures and not in the middle of the report. Suppose you have conducted your survey in Pithoragarh area and you want to show the map of different localities within Pithoragarh. So Kumar, Bid, Panda, all these localities in Pithoragarh, you have to use their maps also. So rather than putting these maps in the middle, you can put them towards the end as annexures, right? So with this, apart from the maps, the other things which will be put as annexures, they could be the questionnaires, the pilot and the file-in questionnaires. I hope you remember a little while ago I talked about interviewing people. So many times you use questionnaires. You will be reading about them in detail in your 4th semester. So you use questionnaires to collect the data, to interview the people. So there are two types of questionnaires, basically pilot and final. So in case you have used a particular questionnaire to collect data, to interview the people, then you have to put that questionnaire towards the end as annexure. Then statistical table, I told you a little while ago, random number table, log and anti-log tables, which cannot be put in the middle of the book, middle of the project report, then you put it towards the end. Again, secondary data tables, data which has been collected by somebody else and you are simply using that data. I told you about the census 2011 report or the newspaper cuttings, etc. All these things can be put at the end as annexures, and again maps. Is this okay? So these things would be put towards the end. So this is how we will have our annexures, and this is how we now can also complete our concluding section. So now that we have completed our discussion on various sections of the report and various contents in the report, let me make it clear to you again that you would be basically using this skill of report writing after your 4th semester when you have completed your summer internship. You'll have to prepare a report on what you did there. You probably would be conducting some research there, so that you have to mention. And then in the 6th semester, you have to prepare a dissertation project. So there also you'll have to write the report. So you please ensure that you use the format that we have discussed in the last 2 classes plus this particular class. In these 3 sessions, we have discussed the reports and the various contents and how you have to write the report. So please ensure that you follow this particular format when you are writing those reports in your 4th and the 6th semester. And one more thing, as you come for the offline classes, I'll also share with you the reports which have been submitted by the seniors, by your seniors, so that not only you can understand how a report is prepared, but also you can understand what all mistakes they have made while preparing this report, preparing their reports. And then this would be a learning for you, so that you don't repeat the same mistakes when you write your reports after 4th and the 6th semesters. Is that fine? So thank you very much for your time. Don't worry if you have found today's discussion a little too technical or complex. I will be taking remedial classes after we start the offline classes again. Once we start the offline classes again, we'll be having remedial classes. I'll clarify all your doubts. However, you can call me up and get your doubts clarified straight away on phone as well. Thank you very much for your time.